George Mason is one of the most influential founders that most people have never heard of. He's the reason I'm doing the show right now because of his quote, "A nation can't," basically paraphrased, "a nation can't stand if it doesn't go back to its fundamental principles." He didn't become president. He didn't sign the Constitution, and he didn't seek the spotlight, but his words shaped American liberty in ways that echo to this day. Mason was the man who put freedom into writing before Jefferson, before Madison, before the Bill of Rights. His Virginian Declaration of Rights of 1776 became the template for America's own Declaration of Independence and later the U.S. Bill of Rights. He was respected, principled, and unyielding, a man who believed liberty meant nothing if it wasn't written down and protected against government power. Oh, it gets me fired up. He wasn't the loudest voice, but he was one of the clearest. And that's why history remembers George Mason as the author of the Virginian Declaration of Rights. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have...
Sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not
those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
We pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
George Mason was born in 1725 in Fairfax County, Virginia. His father died when he was young, leaving Mason's mother to raise him and manage the family estate, Gunston's Hall. Mason received very little formal schooling, but through self-education and voracious reading, he became one of the best-informed men in Virginia. He grew into a wealthy planter, respected in his community, but unlike many wealthy planters of his time, Mason was very weary of power. He believed freedom could be fragile and that without safeguards, tyranny could rise even in a republic. Now, in 1776, Virginia declared its independence from Britain and needed a new constitution. Mason was tasked with drafting the Declaration of Rights. The result was a bold statement that declared all men are born equally free and independent. Government is instituted for the common benefit and may be altered when it fails its duty. Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and the right to trial by a jury were essential liberties. Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights was groundbreaking. It was one of the first formal documents in a world to lay out natural rights as the foundation of government. And in it, Mason wrote one of the clearest defenses of a republic virtue in American history, and it is my favorite quote, and it is the reason why we are doing this show. "No free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people, but by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles." No free government or the blessings of liberty can be preserved to any people, but by a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles. That one sentence captured Mason's entire philosophy. Liberty just wasn't something you declared once and forgot about. It had to be constantly renewed, revisited, and protected against corruption. Thomas Jefferson would echo its language just weeks later in the Declaration of Independence. James Madison would draw heavily from it when drafting the Bill of Rights. Mason's work didn't just guide Virginia, it shaped the American ideal of liberty itself. In 1787, Mason attended the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. At first, he supported creating a stronger central government, but as the debates went on, Mason grew deeply concerned. The Constitution was written, but had no Bill of Rights. Mason believed this was unacceptable. Without explicit protections for freedom of speech, religion, due process, the new government could abuse its powers. He fought hard for those rights to be included. And when they weren't, Mason did something few others dared. He refused to sign the Constitution. And it was a bold stand. Mason respected the need for a stronger union, but could not compromise on its liberty. His opposition pushed Madison and others to adopt the Bill of Rights a few years later. Now, after the convention, Mason returned to Gunston Hall, continuing to speak out against unchecked power. Though he lived a quieter life in his later years, his reputation as a defender of liberty remained strong. He died in 1792, just before the Bill of Rights. The very protections he demanded were ratified. Though he never signed the Constitution, his fingerprints are all over its first 10 amendments. George Mason never held national office. He wasn't a president or a general or a celebrated diplomat, but he was the conscience of the revolution. The man who reminded his peers that independence meant nothing if the people's rights weren't protected. His Virginia Declaration of Rights became America's moral foundation. And George Mason, author of the Virginia Declaration of Rights and the inspiration for the Bill of Rights, he stood for liberty, not just in speeches, but in written guarantees that would outlive him. He showed that revolutions don't just need independence, they need protections for the people. I really appreciate you listening. I love George Mason, man. He is one of my favorites. Remember, history isn't boring. It is the story of principles strong enough to shape nations and not go along with the status quo when equal protections aren't given to its citizens. I will see you next time.